They say architects create spaces for people to live in. But for me, one night in Santa Barbara, I realized some people use marriage to build prisons. And my daughter, she was the first brick in that design. I thought I was the one designing homes for others, but someone else was drafting the blueprint to bury my family. What they didn't know was that a man who had drawn hundreds of architectural plans could also draw a trap. 3 months, one fake marriage, one money-laundering network, and one father who understood the language they thought he didn't. If you've ever wondered how far a father would go to protect the child he loves most, this is the answer. Before I tell you how I turned a construction project into a trap that made 3 people kneel before justice, hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and tell me where you're listening from. Because what you're about to hear isn't just a revenge story, it's a blueprint for truth. I heard the waves before I heard the doorbell. The Santa Barbara afternoon slid into evening slowly, the last sunlight spilling across the window frame like a streak of honey. By the 3rd chime, Olivia was already standing in the doorway, her face glowing in that way that makes any father both proud and uneasy. "Dad," she said, wrapping her arms around my neck, "I want you to meet Alex and his parents." They were all of Spanish descent. Behind her stood a tall, tanned man with an easy smile. "Alejandro Ruiz," he said, shaking my hand, "but everyone calls me Alex." Beside him, a woman in an ivory dress with softly curled brown hair reached out with a perfectly polite smile. "Luciana, but you can call me Lucy." And finally, the older man, confident posture, darting eyes that seemed to price everything around him, laughed loudly. "Sergio Ruiz, you can call me Sir Joe." The 3 of them entered my home like a real estate inspection team. Their eyes swept across the walls, the floor, the ceiling, scoring every surface as they went. Sir Joe murmured something to Lucy in their mother tongue, low but rhythmic, like counting. They were valuing the items. When he glanced up at the ceiling, tapped his 2 fingers, and nodded, I knew he'd just estimated the house at least $2 million. "This house is lovely," Lucy said sweetly. "Olivia told us you're an architect, right?" "I'm the one who draws," I replied, letting my gaze rest on the corner where Elena used to keep her easel. "But my late wife was the one who gave everything a soul." Olivia smiled, unaware of the hollow in my voice. "Dad, I told them about Mom. They really admire her." We stepped into the dining room overlooking the ocean. I had set the table. Pan-seared halibut, blood orange salad, and a pot of seafood rice from Elena's old recipe. Alex helped me open the wine. Sergio poured himself a full glass without asking, and Lucy used the excuse of admiring the ocean view to inspect every item in the room, from the antique clock to the wine rack. Olivia whispered to her future mother-in-law, "Dad doesn't speak Spanish, so don't worry." I smiled at that. My daughter didn't know that 2 years living with Elena in San Juan, before Olivia was born, had made me bilingual, but I chose to stay silent. Sometimes, letting people believe you don't understand lets you hear more than words. Throughout dinner, they switched languages mid-sentence. Whenever they shifted into the one Olivia thought I didn't understand, their tone changed. Lower, faster, colder. I didn't need to catch every word. It was enough to know they were talking about the house's value, about plans, and about money. A lot of money. When Lucy tasted my seafood rice, she said something to her husband in their native tongue, her voice slicing softly through the air. "American food is so bland." And the moment I looked up, she smiled brightly. "This is wonderful, so full of family flavor." Olivia smiled proudly, but I only nodded. The way people fake compliments often says more than any insult. "Alex told us you work for Ward and Kepler Designs," Lucy said, her eyes shimmering with polite curiosity. "I heard your firm has a big federal contract." "Just a few veteran housing projects," I answered evenly. "It's just work." Sergio leaned forward, clinking his glass against mine. "Work, family, it's all the same. You just have to pick the right partners. I let his words hang. Elena once told me, when someone says the right partner, they usually mean the right person to exploit. Alex held Olivia's hand, his smile perfectly gentle. Your daughter's special. I promise I'll take care of her. These 3 months have been the happiest of my life, Olivia said, eyes shining. 3 months, I repeated. That's fast. 3 months is enough to know who's meant for you, Lucy chimed in sweetly. Right, Sergio? He nodded, raising his glass, the wine catching the light. Then they switched back to that other language, voices dropping, words flowing like knives scraping glass, clear without translation. I caught fragments. 3 months, papers, money, and house. Lucy whispered something that made Sergio laugh, a short, cold laugh like a hammer striking a safe. I didn't need the full sentences to understand. They had a plan, and those 3 months weren't just about love. They were the countdown of a contract Olivia didn't even know she'd signed. I tilted my head, pretending not to catch on. Sergio froze for half a second, then switched to English, chuckling. Oh, 3 months for the wedding, for the paperwork. In California, things move fast if you know your way. I see. I smiled lightly, as if missing his subtext. But in my mind, lines were already forming, a blueprint of suspicion. I looked at Lucy. She avoided my eyes, twisting the gold ring on her finger, while Sergio rolled his wine glass, as if calculating what percentage of my assets could flow his way. In that moment, for the first time that evening, I saw clearly. This dinner wasn't a blessing. It was a negotiation disguised as hospitality. Through the rest of the meal, I stayed quiet, observing. Lucy probed about assets, Sergio asked about contracts, and Alex kept checking his phone. Once the screen lit up with the name Camila. I said nothing. Maybe a friend, or another part of a plan I hadn't yet seen. Dinner ended. I poured one last glass of wine and watched them toast. The last line of sunlight cut the ocean like a thin red thread. As they said their goodbyes, Lucy gave me a perfunctory hug, her perfume clinging to my shirt. Sergio shook my hand again, gripping harder than needed. Wonderful dinner, Sir Ethan, he said. Family is about sharing everything, right? Depends on what people want to share, I replied, eyes on his hand. When their car disappeared beyond the gate, Olivia turned to me, anxious. What do you think, Dad? They're nice, right? Nice, I said, clearing the glasses. Nice enough to know what not to say. What? I said they're polite. I smiled, patting her shoulder. And as long as you're happy, that's all that matters. When she went upstairs, I stood alone in the quiet kitchen. The sea breeze slipped through the window, carrying salt and chill. In the corner, Elena's old wind chime tinkled softly. I looked around the house, every brick, every beam, every wall, and understood that tonight, this place had become the first stage of a play I never wanted to watch. I picked up my phone and dialed a familiar number. On the other end, after a few rings, a raspy voice answered, Ward, you're still up? Frank, I said, staring out at the ocean, do you still remember how to build a legal trap? Outside, the waves kept their rhythm. Inside this house, the silence had just been broken, not by the sea breeze, but by the footsteps of people who thought I didn't understand what they were saying. The night wind carried salt and the faint creak of wood beneath my feet. After talking to Frank, I didn't go to bed. I walked down the hallway and stopped in front of the photograph hanging there. Elena standing by the San Juan Pier, her smile caught in the wind, her dark hair glinting in the sun. I remembered the first night she taught me to say my first sentence in Spanish. It was simple. Escucha primero. Listen first. Listen before you speak. I was young then, reckless like any other Marine, thinking strength came from a gun. Elena laughed and said, Listening at the right time can save a life. She taught me each word, each pause, not to talk, but to understand. Now, in this empty house, her words echoed back as clearly as the waves. Listen and wait. On the desk, Her old notebook was still there. The last page showed an unfinished sketch of a house that was never built. At the bottom, in her handwriting, it read, "A home is only alive when it can protect someone." I placed my hand on the page as if to touch her. Then the phone buzzed, cutting through the memory. Frank had texted, "Meet at the office at 8 a.m. Don't forget black coffee." The next morning, Santa Barbara was still covered in mist. Sunlight licked through the palms, turning the dew on the tiled roofs into glass. Frank Dalton was already sitting in my old office, boots on the desk, half a cup of coffee gone. He was still the same type of man who'd seen too many battlefields. Quiet, scanning everything before touching it. "You look like you didn't sleep," he said, setting down his newspaper. "The Ruiz clan keeping you up?" "Just thinking about something my wife said," I replied. "Elna?" he asked. I can still hear her voice. "Listen before speaking." "Last night I listened plenty, Frank. I heard more than they thought I could." I told him about the dinner. Sergio's eyes, Lucy's tone, Alex's smile, and those scattered words. 3 months, papers, money, house. Frank stayed silent until I finished. Then he nodded and flipped open the laptop on his desk. "You didn't call me to complain. You want to act." "Right. I need to know who they really are." Frank typed fast, the sound sharp and rhythmic like drum beats. "Ruiz family, Montecito. Fancy name, but no clear financial records. That luxury car showroom Alex claims to manage doesn't exist legally in California." He paused, glancing up. "Even better, old man Sergio was investigated for tax fraud back in 2018 in Texas before vanishing. And Lucy, she had a fake marriage case in 2019, dismissed for lack of evidence." "What about Alex?" I asked. Frank smirked. "The dreamy young man? 3 social accounts, one linked to an IP address in Guadalajara, Mexico." He turned the screen toward me. A photo appeared. Alex beside a young woman with long hair and a slightly rounded belly. The caption read, "Camila Ortega." The name jolted me, the same that flashed on his phone last night. Frank noticed my face shift. "You know her?" "No, but I don't think Olivia does." He shut the laptop, leaning back. "So what's your plan, Ward?" "Nothing," I said. "At least not yet. I just want to keep listening." Frank raised an eyebrow. "You always like the quiet games." "Elna used to say when people think you're blind, they show all their cards." I took a sip of coffee, its bitterness drawing a straight line down my throat. "I need a trap. Legal, clean, and far enough from Olivia." Frank nodded, scribbling on a notepad. "Catalina Developments." "Sounds real enough. A small investment company works with contractors and federal projects. You can lend at your firm's. Name is cover. I'll handle the rest. Website, office, short-term registration. We'll bait them with a minor investment deal, sweet enough to make them bite." I looked at the name, Catalina Developments. Catalina, the island where Elna and I spent our honeymoon. A circle, closing itself. "How long do you need?" 3 days, and one perfectly timed handshake. I nodded. "And in those 3 days, I'll find out why Alex needs 3 months. That night, the house was quiet again. Olivia came home late from teaching. I heard her steps on the stairs, quick and light, just like when she was a child. I didn't want to alarm her, so I kept my tone casual. "Good dinner?" "Yes. Alex wants to take me this weekend to see a villa in Montecito. He says it's for planning our future." I lowered my magazine. "Montecito?" "Yeah, he says the market's great right now. You know he works at that luxury showroom? His clients are all wealthy." I nodded evenly. "If you go, take pictures of the deposit contract, all right?" She frowned. "Why a contract?" "I'm an architect, sweetheart. Everything we build starts with a contract." She laughed, kissed my cheek, and went upstairs. I stayed there, watching the night sea. The surface was calm, but the moonlight drew a thin silver sketch across the water. Beautiful, but without boundaries. I knew I had to finish the design, with logic and what Elena once called the memory of justice. I no longer heard the waves, only the steady ticking of the clock filling the house that had grown too wide, too cold. Since Elena's passing, Santa Barbara had only two sounds left: the ocean and the silence. Both could fool you into thinking you were at peace until someone touched them. The next morning, I arrived at the office early. Sunlight filtered through the glass panels, casting reflections on a half-finished model, a community housing project for veterans I'd been working on for 2 years. I always thought building homes for those who'd lost everything was my way of keeping a promise to my past. But today, I wasn't here as an architect. I was here as a man designing a trap. Frank came soon after, carrying a thick folder, which he dropped on my desk like a brick. "Catalina Developments," he said. "Registration done, site live. Temporary office on the 6th floor of Parkview. I hired a guy to hang the sign this morning." I opened it. Licenses, tax ID, sample contracts, even a fake employee roster, investment advisors, accountants, secretaries, all legally existing for 3 months. "Perfect," I said. "What about bait?" Frank grinned. "I let a little rumor slip online. Catalina Developments is looking for Latin-owned partners to expand a veteran housing design project. Preference for small businesses. Initial investment is around $40,000 to $50,000. He looked at me. "You know exactly what kind of person bites first?" I did. Someone like Sergio Ruiz, the type who smelled profit before the ink dried. "You handle the paperwork," I said. "I'll handle the stage." Frank tilted his head. "You plan to show up?" "Not right away. I need them to think I'm still the trusting father who knows nothing but blueprints." I paused. "When they think they're in control, that's when they slip?" Frank nodded and left, leaving me with the unfinished model. I stared at its clean lines, then sketched a new concept on the corner. Catalina Tower. Concept. A fictional structure soon to become the perfect lure. 3 days later, Olivia went to see the villa in Montecito. Alex drove a borrowed Range Rover, with Sergio and Lucy tagging along. I said nothing, just stood on the porch and told my daughter, "If they ask about my assets, tell them I'm still paying off this house, and don't sign anything without a witness." She blinked. "You think they're suspicious?" I smiled. "I'm just teaching you the first rule of design. Never sign a blueprint before you've seen the foundation." She laughed, thinking I was joking. When their car disappeared down the drive, I headed straight to the old print shop, now transformed into Catalina's test office. Inside, the new sign gleamed, the smell of paint still sharp. It was just me and 2 old comrades from the service, James Porter, security expert, and Clara, a former accountant now acting as Frank's temporary assistant. "You sure they'll come?" Clara asked, checking the recorder hidden behind the framed art. "Sure," I said. "A man like Sergio never passes up easy profit." James nodded, adjusting a camera in the corner. "And if he thinks you're the soft target, he'll push harder." "Exactly," I said. "That impatience is what I need." By afternoon, a text from Olivia arrived. "Dad, Alex wants to introduce me to a friend in investments. Something called Catalina. Sounds fancy." I stared at the screen, but didn't reply. 30 minutes later, a message from Frank. "They've asked about the project. Hooked." I turned off my phone and stepped onto the balcony overlooking the sea. Santa Barbara at sunset looked like a perfect architectural rendering. Light layered over color, brush strokes across the water, but I knew beneath that calm surface ran currents powerful enough to destroy anyone who mistook beauty for safety. That evening, Olivia called on video. She smiled brightly, saying Alex was enthusiastic, Sergio was interesting to talk to, and Lucy had praised the dinner as very European. I listened, pretending not to notice how Olivia stretched the word dad longer than usual, as if testing my reaction. When she paused, I said only one thing. "They seem to really love you." Olivia nodded, and I saw in her eyes that trust and innocence were still intact. I turned off the screen, my chest heavy as lead. At 1 a.m., Frank called back. "They arranged to meet Catalina's representative tomorrow afternoon. Sergio wants to see the paperwork and offered a test investment." How much? $50,000. I exhaled slowly. And are you sure they won't be suspicious? They think they're the hunters, Frank said. You're the easy prey in an expensive suit. The only thing they don't know is that this prey once shot 10 times better than they did. I smiled faintly. Good. Let them come. After he hung up, I sat alone in the dark, with only the clock and the ocean wind for company. On the wall, the Catalina Tower sketch was still unfinished. I looked at it, the straight lines, the play of light and shadow, and realized I was building not a tower, but a plan of silence. Elena used to say, silence is the rarest material in any life drawing. Tonight, I understood how true that was. Morning in Santa Barbara brought a strange light, clear yet dusted with a thin veil of gold that made everything look more beautiful than it was. I stepped outside in a plain white shirt, a gray tie, and the charcoal suit Elena used to like. Before I left, I paused by her framed photo, that gaze watching me, half sad, half trusting. I can't promise I'll win, I whispered, but I promise I'll stay sharp. Frank waited in the Parkview lot, leaning on a silver sedan, black coffee in hand, squinting at me. You look like you're meeting a real investor, he said. No difference. Except the other side isn't investing money. They're investing sin, I replied. We both chuckled softly. On the 6th floor, the Catalina Developments office was staged like a theater. Glossy sign, fresh flowers at reception, and the Catalina Tower, rendering displayed as proof of a dream about to come true. Clara checked the recorder and James adjusted the lens. Everything's ready, she said. I checked the clock, 10:48, 12 minutes to go. Frank glanced over. Which role tonight? The humble architect or the dreamy entrepreneur? Both. But what they don't know is this dreamer once led a recon team. The elevator chimed and 3 people walked in, just as I'd pictured. Sergio led with the swagger of a man who walks into rooms like they belong to him. Lucy followed, smile radiant but eyes cold. Alex, shirt open at the top 2 buttons and hair slicked, gripped his phone like a talisman. When their eyes landed on me beside the drawing, all 3 froze. Oh, Mr. Ward? Lucy blurted, clearly surprised. I thought we were meeting Catalina Developments rep today, not... I am that representative, I said, calm, but letting each word fall on the wood floor. Welcome to my company. Alex glanced around, his face paling. I thought this was a new partner, not Dad. I'm the lead architect, I said, steady. Catalina Developments is the branch I set up for federal housing projects. Sergio recovered his poise quickly and laughed a bit too loudly. Oh, marvelous. What a coincidence. Small world, isn't it? Small enough to surprise you, I replied. Frank played the project attorney, stepping out with a black briefcase, voice composed. We're looking for strategic partners with capital and management experience. The target is veteran housing, a permitted project backed by state infrastructure programs. Sergio feigned concern. Federal project? Sounds full of opportunity? If the right team is in place, Frank said, we need a Latino-owned business to qualify for community preference. I added, this isn't a token. It's a real opportunity. We're in the pre-financial due diligence phase. Sergio smiled. I have a small company in Houston importing materials. Not large, but we have paperwork proving Latino ownership. Perfect, I said, hiding my smile. Lucy chimed in, voice like silk. And of course we didn't come empty-handed. My husband prepared an initial investment, just to show good faith. Sergio set a leather briefcase on the table and clicked it open. Inside, a neat stack of cash lay compact, as if he'd practiced the motion 100 times. A modest sum, he said. Consider it a courtesy deposit. The room thickened. Frank flicked a look to the camera to record. I signaled him. He opened a file and slid a receipt titled Deposit for Preliminary Partnership. I signed and handed back a copy. Sergio skimmed it without noticing the fine print Frank had inserted. The capital contributor acknowledged that the purpose of collaboration was not to conceal or legitimize illicit proceeds. Lucy raised her glass to mine. To a good start, I clinked back, eyes fixed on their faces. In the wine's reflected light, I saw the cracks in the fake. Alex offered, "We can add more capital if the project expands." "Of course," I said, "but every transaction will go through an audit." His pause was brief. Then Sergio laughed. "Naturally, Mr. Ward. We're serious businessmen." As Frank stepped out to fetch documents, the tone shifted. Sergio leaned to Lucy and murmured. They began speaking quickly in their native tongue, the language they assumed I didn't understand. Their voices dropped, but the intent was clear. Use the project to clean money from Mexico. 3 months is enough to legitimize the paperwork. And keep the naive girl, Olivia, until everything's done. I heard it all, yet kept my composure, pretending to study the drawing. Their biggest mistake was believing my daughter's claim that Dad doesn't speak Spanish, which gave me the priceless arrogance of liars. They stood. Sergio shook my hand with practiced warmth. "We'll send more documents and permits soon. This looks like a long-term partnership, Mr. Ward." "I hope so," I replied, holding his hand a fraction longer. "And I respect honest people." After they left, Frank waited until the door shut before pulling the recorder out. Their voices were there, not the raw Spanish, but the translation inside my head. Slow motion clarity. 3 months, paperwork, divorce, split in 2. I closed my eyes and felt each word like a pin in a circuit board. "Hear that?" Frank said. 3 months, just like that night. "Yes," I answered. "We have our first proof?" That afternoon, Olivia called, excited. "Dad, Alex says next week they have a new project, and maybe you could help with design. He said Catalina Developments is partnering with your firm." I paused, hiding a long sigh. "Is that so? Sounds interesting. Remember to record what they say, okay?" "Record? Why are you suspicious?" "No," I said softly. "I just want to keep memories. Your voice when you're happy is the thing worth recording in life." She laughed, thinking it a joke. I shut the phone and stared at the sea. Wind battered the rocks below the cliff, foam sketching an uncertain border. I knew this game had only begun. Tonight's waves would mark the beats of what I was building. Not a building, but an arena where the hunters would soon discover they had walked into my house. Santa Barbara was strangely quiet that morning. The sea was still, the palms didn't sway, and the only sound came from the soft hum of the coffee machine in the kitchen. I sat at my desk and replayed yesterday's recording. Sergio's voice came first, steady, confident, then Lucy's, light as silk, and finally Alex's, lower, hesitant. He didn't speak much, but every word peeled back another layer of who he truly was. I slowed the playback, jotting notes for each line. 3 months for paperwork. Transfer funds through the Mexico company. She trusts me. Every time I heard the word she, my chest tightened. They were talking about Olivia as if she were a product, something to be delivered right on schedule. Frank walked in with a cup of coffee, the faint scent of smoke still clinging to his jacket. "I've listened again," he said. "Every word's as clear as a criminal report. What's next?" "Nothing yet," I answered. "I want to see how deep they'll sink." He nodded and opened his laptop, showing a string of new emails. Lucy emailed Catalina's fake office. She says her husband wants to increase the investment to $50,000. They want to sign the contract within 2 weeks. Faster than I expected. "Greedy people rush," Frank said. But I found something else. He scrolled to the email signature, Ruiz Holdings, LLC, Houston branch. At the bottom, a bank account number in Mexico City. "They're not even hiding anymore," he said. "Good. The more open they are, the easier it is to prove." That afternoon, Olivia stopped by with a bag of pastries and her usual bright smile. "Dad, I think Alex is really serious. They invited you to dinner this Friday to discuss a partnership between your firm and theirs." "Friday night?" I raised an eyebrow. "Where?" A seaside restaurant in Montecito. Alex said Mr. Sergio wants you to see their potential. I nodded. You should come with me. Me? She blinked. They said it's just business. Even better. If they're serious, you have every right to hear them. I smiled. I want to see how they perform when they realize there's an audience. Friday night. Montecito glittered. The restaurant sat by the water, luxurious enough for people who measured worth by appearances. When I walked in, Lucy and Sergio were already seated. Alex stood, smiling awkwardly when he saw Olivia with me. I caught that flicker of unease in his eyes, and in that instant, I knew their confidence was cracking. "Mr. Ward!" Sergio exclaimed, arms wide. "An honor to host Santa Barbara's finest architect." "Thank you," I said, shaking his hand. "I'm curious what you wanted to discuss." "Oh, just a small matter," Lucy said sweetly. "We'd like deeper cooperation. My husband believes your reputation could help the Catalina project get approved faster." Then they switched languages. They thought Olivia and I couldn't understand. Their exchange was quick, precise, like seasoned dealers. Add another 50,000 so he feels important. In 3 months, once the paperwork clears, Olivia will sign the marriage. Then the divorce, the asset split. All legal, all clean. I sat still, pretending to read the menu. Olivia smiled, unaware that her life was being divided up sentence by sentence. I set down my glass, smiling. "I hear you have a company in Houston?" Sergio flinched, then recovered with a laugh. "Yes, a small one." "And the Mexico City bank account? Also part of the company?" Lucy tilted her head, her smile freezing. "You have quite a sense of humor." "I rarely joke," I replied softly. The air tightened. Alex quickly interjected. "Dad, I think you misunderstood. Sergio just—" "I'm not your dad," I cut him off calmly, "and I know exactly what I heard." For the first time they exchanged looks, not polite ones, but the wary glances of predators, realizing the prey might have teeth. Sergio changed the subject swiftly, but his knuckles whitened around his glass. I let them talk, memorizing every detail. At the end, Lucy said pointedly, "We'll bring cash for the final signing. Will that work for you, Mr. Ward?" "Of course," I said. "I'm looking forward to it." As we left, Olivia turned to me. "Dad, do you feel like they were different tonight?" "Different how?" "Tense. And Alex, he wouldn't look me in the eye." "Maybe they're tired," I said. "Or maybe they realize they said something they shouldn't have." "What do you mean?" I looked at her. "Olivia, have you ever thought you might be part of someone's plan?" She laughed lightly. "You're imagining things, Dad." I didn't answer. That night, I sat on the balcony, listening to waves crash against the rocks. Frank called. "Heard you had an interesting dinner." "More than interesting. They're bringing the cash." "And Olivia?" "She's starting to doubt, but not enough yet." "You know what to do next?" I was silent for a moment. "She has to hear it herself." Frank understood and said nothing more. After he hung up, I stayed there, staring at the faint trail of stars stretching south toward Mexico, the place where all their secrets began. I thought of Elena and her words. "When a blueprint starts to crack, don't patch it. Let the light in. That's how you see which part of the structure is still alive." The first crack had appeared, but the light wasn't enough yet. Santa Barbara burned the next day, the kind of heat that seemed to pour straight from molten metal. I arrived at the Catalina office early, opened the windows to let in the sea air, and poured a cup of black coffee, the bitterness mixed with salt, the blend Elena once called the scent of truth. Frank arrived minutes later, tossing a newspaper on the desk. The front page detailed a money-laundering ring through construction firms in Houston. No arrests yet. I looked at the headline, then at him. "You think it's them?" "Don't think. I know. One of the companies named is Ruiz Holdings." I nodded, quiet for a moment. "Then we've hit the live wire." Frank smirked. "And that wire's about to burn itself out. They're bringing the money today, right?" 2 p.m. sharp. I want everything recorded. Cameras, audio, all of it. Leave that to me. At exactly 1:57, there was a knock. Sergio entered first, followed by Lucy and Alex. They carried a heavy leather bag. The zip made a faint hiss that seemed to thicken the air. I stood and smiled politely. Welcome. Punctuality is a rare virtue. Sergio grinned, that fake grin of a man used to negotiating from above. In business, being on time is respect. We brought $50,000 as agreed. Cash. He placed the bag on the table and opened it. Stacks of crisp bills, the scent of fresh ink still sharp. Lucy smiled. I like seeing real money, Mr. Ward. It makes things tangible. I signaled Frank, who, still in his role as attorney, opened the folder and read slowly, like reciting scripture. This is a preliminary investment contract, specifying the contribution to the Catalina Housing Project for veterans. The investors acknowledge that the funds are not intended for laundering, fraud, or falsifying residency documents. Sergio chuckled. Of course, of course. He signed without reading. Lucy and Alex followed, their signatures trembling slightly with eagerness. I poured wine, offering them glasses. The red reflected the light like blood in glass. They toasted in their language, and then naturally they stayed with it. Confident I didn't understand. Sergio's tone was firm, Lucy's quick, Alex's low and nervous. I smiled and nodded, pretending to agree about wine while every vein in my body tightened. When Frank asked them to read the investment confirmation aloud, for record purposes, I stood behind the chair, watching closely. Read it clearly, Frank said. Your name and the investment amount. Sergio Ruiz, he said firmly, investing $50,000. Luciana Ruiz, co-investor. Alejandro Ruiz, signing witness. Their voices were clear, each word caught by the recorder hidden behind the vase. Perfect, I said, nodding. We're officially partners. Sergio stood and shook my hand. I knew you were a trustworthy man, Mr. Ward. I think so too, I replied. Lucy stepped closer, smiling brightly. If this project works, we could expand in Texas. I have many friends there. Of course, I said. Texas suits your kind. When they left, I closed the door and listened to the elevator doors slide shut. Frank detached the recorder and plugged in the headphones. Sergio's voice came through. Spanish only, fast, firm. He took off the headphones, frowning. I can hear every word, but I don't understand a thing. It's all in their mother tongue. I nodded and took the headphones. I listened again, each clipped sound slicing the air. I didn't need a second pass to understand. They were talking about a 3-month timeline, the paperwork, and splitting the money in half. Then Lucy's voice cut in, slower and sharper. She was talking about after the wedding, 3 years, papers, a clean divorce. It wasn't just money laundering. They were talking about a sham marriage, a green card, and a plan to divide assets legally. I stopped the tape, rewound 10 seconds, and listened again. This time, Alex's voice came through low and husky, also in that language. I closed my eyes and translated it in my head. She won't suspect anything. She believes I really love her. I opened my eyes, a chill running down my back. By then I understood. The money was only part of it. The real target was Olivia, the girl they saw as a gate to citizenship, assets, and lawful freedom. Frank was quiet for a few seconds, then asked, You're sure? I answered softly, I'm sure. They thought I wouldn't understand, and that was their first mistake. Frank nodded slowly. Now we have evidence. What about Olivia? I'll let her hear it herself, I said. But before she listens, I'll translate it for her. So every word on the tape isn't just sound, but truth. That night I went home. Olivia's light was still on. I knocked. She was on the bed, eyes red. Are you all right? I asked. Alex is acting strange, she said, voice shaking. He's taking a lot of calls in Spanish. When I ask, he says it's clients. But every time I walk in, he hangs up. And today, Dad, do you know he withdrew $20,000 from our joint account? I stayed silent. He said it was an investment for you, for your company. I don't understand anything anymore. I sat beside her and laid a hand on her shoulder. Olivia, I said slowly, sometimes the people we love most are the ones who test us the deepest. Do you trust me? Yes, she whispered. Then let me handle it. And if you hear anything strange, don't react. Just let them talk. That night, after Olivia slept, I called Frank. Start phase 2, I said. Keep the whole tape and send a copy to Attorney Green's office in Los Angeles. If anything happens, they'll know what to do. You expecting the storm? No. I'm putting the roof on before it rains. At my desk, I opened one of Elena's old designs, a cliffside house with glass walls and a roof arched like a sail. She had written beneath it, "Every structure has its moment to test the wind." I read it softly, then added a small line, "And every liar has a day to face the light." Tomorrow they would bring the money again, and this time Olivia would be there, not as my daughter, but as the first witness in the blueprint of justice I was about to build. That morning, fog draped the Santa Barbara shore like a thin curtain, making my cliffside house seem to float in clouds. Olivia sat at the table with a steaming cup of coffee, dark circles under her eyes like she hadn't slept. I set the laptop down without a word. Frank had sent the audio at 3 a.m. with a short note. Now it's time for her to know. Before I hit play, I spoke slowly. There's something you don't know. When your mother and I lived in San Juan before you were born, I spoke Spanish fairly well. So from the first evening we met them, I understood everything they said. I only pretended I didn't. Olivia looked at me, startled, then gave a faint laugh, thinking I was teasing. Hiding talents again, Dad? I guess you're about to show me something big, she said, half curious, half tired. I answered, You're right, but it's not what you expect. I pressed play. A soft static, then Sergio's voice, low and firm, in the language they always assumed I didn't understand. I watched Olivia. She frowned, trying to follow, but couldn't. I paused and spoke slowly. They're talking about you, about the marriage. They say after getting married 3 years later, once the papers are done, they'll split the money and do a clean divorce. Olivia looked up, her lips trembling. A divorce? Are they serious? I nodded, then played on. Lucy's voice followed in the same language, soft, cold, like silk tearing. I translated, Keep the girl obedient until all procedures are complete, and after that Alex can return to Mexico to be with the woman he really loves. Olivia shot to her feet. No, Dad, no way. He loves me. He loves his plan more, I said flatly. I let her sit, letting silence do the rest. Then I opened the final clip. Alex's voice came through low, each word distinct. I didn't translate, just looked at Olivia. She understood. Her face collapsed as if her trust had fallen into an empty void. Dad, she said hoarsely. Why would they do this? I answered. Because some people see love as a transaction and marriage as a contract. She cried, but the tears weren't weak. There was something else there, the same steel I'd once seen in Elena when she realized who was betraying her project. I recognized the glint I used to fear, but now welcomed. I want to see him, she said. No, I answered, not yet. We need them to believe you still don't know. The more they believe, the more they reveal. I picked up a drawing on the table, one Elena never finished, the glass house facing the sea. I pointed to it. Elena used to say light is the enemy of those who live in darkness. We'll use that light. That afternoon, Frank arrived carrying 2 equipment cases, cameras, a mic hidden in the frame, and a pinhole in the lampshade. He looked at Olivia, serious. You gonna be okay? I have to, she said, drying her tears. They walked into my home and ate at my table. I want them to face themselves. The plan was simple. Tomorrow, Olivia would invite Alex for lunch with Dad. Frank and I would hide the cameras in the living room. No confrontation, no shouting, just observation. We needed him to say out loud what the tape had already shown. After Frank left, I stood at the window looking down at the sea. Each wave hit the rock and shattered, white, violent, but precise as a heartbeat. Elena once said, "Every wave knows when to break, so it can return." I thought maybe my family was at just that moment, the necessary fracture before peace comes back. That night, Olivia didn't sleep. I heard her door open and her steps on the balcony. I followed. She was staring at the water, hair blown by the cold wind. "Dad," she whispered, "I don't know if I'm strong enough." I laid my hand on her shoulder. Strength isn't the absence of fear. It's standing despite it. You're already halfway there. She turned to me, eyes wet and bright. "You won't let them hurt me, will you?" I squeezed her shoulder. "No one can hurt you once you've seen the truth." When the night finally settled, I returned to my desk. The glass house drawing was still open. Beneath Elna's line, I wrote another. "Sometimes light isn't just for seeing, it's for burning." Tomorrow, Alex would come, and for the first time, he would have no idea that everything around him, the walls, the meal, even Olivia's smile, was glass, transparent but reflecting every lie. When they left, I closed the door and listened to the elevator fade. Frank removed the recorder and plugged in the headphones. Sergio's voice came first, Spanish, fast, deliberate. He frowned. "I can hear every word, but I can't understand a thing. It's all in their mother tongue." I nodded, took the headset, and listened. Each clipped syllable cut the air like a blade. I didn't need to replay it twice to know what it meant. 3 months, paperwork, and splitting the money. Then Lucy's voice came through, slow, sharp, merciless. She spoke about after the marriage, 3 years, legal papers, clean divorce. Not just money laundering. This was a fake marriage, a green card, a legal profit scheme. I rewound 10 seconds. Alex's voice appeared, low, hoarse, also in Spanish. I closed my eyes, translating, "She won't know anything. She believes I love her." When I opened them, my chest felt cold. Now it was clear. The money was just bait. The real target was Olivia, her name, her citizenship, her trust. Frank stayed silent for a moment, then said, "You're sure?" "Completely," I answered. "They thought I didn't understand. That's their first mistake." He nodded. "Then we've got proof. What about Olivia?" "She needs to hear it herself," I said. "But before she does, I'll translate every word, so it's not just noise, it's truth." That night, I found her awake, eyes swollen. "You okay?" I asked. "Alex has been weird," she said, trembling. "Calls in Spanish all the time. Says it's clients, but hangs up when I walk in. And today he withdrew $20,000 from our joint account. Said it was for your project. I don't get it." I sat beside her. "Olivia, sometimes the ones we love most test us hardest. Do you trust me?" "Yes," she whispered. "Then let me handle it. If you hear something strange, don't react. Just listen." Later, after she fell asleep, I called Frank. "Phase 2 starts now. Keep the recordings. Send a copy to Green's office in L.A. If anything happens, they'll know what to do." "Expecting trouble?" "No, just building the roof before the rain." On my desk lay one of Elena's unfinished blueprints, a glass house by the cliffs, the roof curved like a sail. Her note read, "Every structure has a moment to test the wind." I added beneath it, "And every liar has a day to face the light." Tomorrow, they'd bring the money again, and this time, Olivia would be there. Morning came wrapped in fog, making the cliffside house look as if it floated in clouds. Olivia sat at the table with coffee, sleepless. I set down the laptop. Frank had sent the audio at 3 a.m. with a message. Time for her to know. Before playing it, I said, "There's something you don't know. Before you were born, when your mother and I lived in San Juan, I spoke Spanish fluently. I understood everything that first night. I just pretended not to." She blinked, half laughing. "You're serious? What are you about to show me?" "The truth," I said, pressing play. Static crackled. Sergio's voice filled the room, steady, confident, in that same tongue. Olivia frowned, not understanding. I paused. They're talking about you, about the marriage. 3 years later, once the papers are done, they'll split the money and divorce. She stared at me, trembling. Divorce? They said that? I nodded, then resumed. Lucy's voice slid in, soft, cold. Keep her quiet until the process is done. Then Alex can go back to Mexico, to the woman he truly loves. Olivia stood abruptly. No, he loves me. He loves his plan, I said quietly. When Alex's own voice played, she didn't need translation. I saw it. The collapse of faith. The pain that hardens instead of breaking. Why would they do this? She whispered. Because some people see love as business and marriage as a contract, I said. She cried, but there was steel behind it now. The same look Elna had when she found betrayal in her blueprints. I want to see him. Not yet, I said. Let them think you don't know. The more they believe, the deeper they sink. I pointed to Elena's sketch of the glass house. Light destroys what lives in shadow. We'll use it. That afternoon, Frank brought 2 cases. Cameras, mics, and hidden setups. He looked at her. You good? I have to be, she said. They dined in my home. I'll make them face what they did. The plan. She'd invite Alex for lunch with Dad. We'd record everything. No yelling, just truth unfolding. When Frank left, I watched the waves below. Each broke on the rocks, clean and sure. Elna once said, every wave knows when to break. Maybe our family was there now, the break before calm. That night, Olivia couldn't sleep. I found her on the balcony. I don't know if I'm strong enough, she whispered. Strength isn't the absence of fear, I said. It's standing while afraid. You're already halfway there. You won't let them hurt me, right? No one can once you've seen the truth. Later, at my desk, I wrote under Elena's line, sometimes light isn't just for seeing, it's for burning. Tomorrow, Alex would walk in unaware that every wall, every smile, every reflection was glass, transparent, but showing every lie. Olivia turned away, tears rolling down. Sergio slammed his palm on the table. That's staged. By whom? I asked, voice steady. By me? Or by you, the man who brought $50,000 into my company to legitimize dirty money? Frank stepped out from the adjacent room, unhurried, carrying a file. All evidence has been verified, Mr. Sergio, including fingerprints on the contract and cash serial numbers matching the Houston laundering case. Lucy went pale, and Alex stood, voice shaking. You don't understand. I only did what my father told me. People usually say that right before court, Frank replied. Sergio growled. None of you has the right to accuse us. You're just an old man living in a glass house. I stood, the light from the glass wall washing over his face. Yes, I said, and this glass house reflects everything. In here, no one escapes the light. Lucy burst into tears, and Alex looked around, truly panicked. Dad, let's go, he said, but Sergio didn't move. He stared at me, eyes full of hatred and fear. You'll regret this, Ward. We have friends in places you can't imagine. I stepped closer, voice still calm. Good. The more people who see this, the easier justice finds us. Frank tapped his phone. The back door opened, and 2 officers entered, one from the Santa Barbara Sheriff's Office, one an FBI agent. Sergio Ruiz, the agent said, you are under arrest for money laundering, investment fraud, and conspiracy to commit a sham marriage for immigration benefits. Lucy sobbed. Alex trembled. I said nothing, only looked at Olivia. She stood, came to me, and whispered, I don't want to see them anymore. I nodded and led her toward the stairs. Behind us, handcuffs clinked, hard and dry. As they were led out, an ocean wind rose, scattering papers across the table. One was a copy of the investment contract. I picked it up, folded it, and placed it in a drawer. Frank exhaled. It's done, he said. Almost, I answered, looking out to where rain began to streak the glass wall. No, the real storm has only just begun. Because I knew men like Sergio never act alone, and in the darkness after rain, someone else remained, unseen hands pulling the strings. Whoever they were, they would still have to pass through this light. 2 weeks after the arrest, Santa Barbara fell into an odd hush. The sea wind kept its rhythm. The waves kept breaking, but inside my glass house, sound seemed drained from everything. Olivia had moved in with her best friend to avoid the media. I didn't stop her. She needed quiet to heal, and I needed solitude to learn how deep this game truly went. Frank called daily. Sergio and Lucy had entered preliminary pleas. Alex was held at a federal center. But what troubled me wasn't them. It was the gaps in the answers. No one in the files was named as the director. No one claimed to have initiated the final transfer. A perfect blank space, which told me there was someone else waiting for us to stop. That morning, the mailman knocked and handed me a beige envelope with no sender, only a Mexico City postmark. I opened it. Inside was a single page folded into 3, carrying a faint perfume. The handwriting soft, slightly shaky but resolute. Mr. Ward, I don't ask for your forgiveness, but you need to know the truth. My name is Camila Ortega. I'm pregnant with Alex's child. I knew nothing about his family's plan until they forced me to sign a non-disclosure. When I refused, they sent people to my mother's house in Puebla. I barely escaped. I heard Olivia was hurt, and if possible, please tell her I am also a victim. Alex promised to run away with me after he got citizenship, but I realized he never intended to keep his word. I have evidence, bank transactions and emails between him and someone named R.C. in Houston. I will send them to your attorney. Please don't let them find me. I sat still, reading it 3 times. Wind moved through the frame, twitching the paper's edge. IRC, 2 initials, familiar like a distant echo. I flipped through Frank's files to the page listing companies tied to Ruiz Holdings. At the bottom, a name. Red Coast Imports, Houston, Texas. I murmured, Red Coast, RC. Frank walked in just then and saw the letter. I guess we were just handed another layer of the maze, he said, pouring coffee. I gave it to him, my voice rough. Camilla is alive, and she has evidence. He read quickly, eyes darkening. If she's right, Ruiz is only a shell. Red Coast is the real laundering hub. They use sham marriages as a shield, while the money cycles through real estate projects. I stood and stepped to the glass. Rain had begun, each drop slow as a heartbeat. You still have Green on the line? Of course, Frank said. She's working with immigration and financial crimes. But we need something concrete to force them out. We have it, I said, lifting the letter. And if Camilla's telling the truth, we must find her before they do. That night, I sat with Elena's unfinished design. The glass house, the symbol of truth, had gained a few more lines. I wrote in the margin, not everyone who runs from the light is guilty. Some are only hurt by it. I thought of Camilla, a young woman pulled into a whirlpool of greed, then of Olivia, trying to believe she was strong enough to rise. I understood that light can burn innocent souls too, if not directed carefully. Frank called near midnight. Green confirmed, he said. Red Coast is registered to another man, Raymond Clark. That name appears on the Texas investor list Sergio mentioned. I closed my eyes. Raymond Clark, I knew that name. Years ago, he'd been a contractor Elena and I worked with. That project was halted for financial violations, and Elena filed an internal report against him. 2 months later, his company collapsed, and Elena received a string of threats. I thought it ended that year. Now I understood. He'd returned, by another road. We have to go to Houston, I said. Frank's voice was low. I knew you'd say that. But this isn't personal anymore, Ethan. This is a federal network. Even better, I answered slowly. I'm not going for revenge. I'm going to close it. The next morning I called Olivia. She answered after a few rings, still sounding worn. Dad, she said, everyone at school knows. I just want to go somewhere. Far away. You will, I said, but not to hide. To end it. I told her briefly about Camila. She went quiet. She's pregnant? Yes. And she's afraid. Dad, I want to go with you. No, I said. If Camilla's right, the place you need to be is here to receive the truth when it comes back. When I hung up, Frank walked in with plane tickets and a fresh file. 7 o'clock flight to Houston, he said. I looped in green. She'll meet us at the Federal Building, and if Clark is the puppeteer, he won't stay still for long. I looked out at the sea, clouds stacked in dark layers. I thought of Elena, the letter, and 2 women wounded by the same man. I slid a copy of Camilla's letter into my inner pocket and closed the door. The engine turned over and the tires rolled slowly along the rain-slick coastal road. In the rear view, Elena's glass house still threw its light, glinting like a warning beacon. Frank asked quietly, "What do you think Clark will do when he knows we're coming?" I answered, voice as even as the waves. "When the light advances, those who live in the dark have only 2 choices: run or set themselves on fire to erase the trail. Both leave smoke, and I'll follow the smoke." The plane touched down in Houston near noon. The air here was denser, drier, and carried the metallic smell of an industrial city. Frank drove the rental while I sat in the passenger seat, silent, watching towers reflect a blade-hot sun. The Red Coast import sign showed up first at the end of the boulevard, a 6-story glass building, its exterior skinned in bright metal. Looking at it, I thought how fitting it was. Even their laundering den chose glass to hide behind. Frank parked across the street. "Green's waiting on the 5th floor," he said. "She has a temporary warrant, but it only covers the admin wing. We need something concrete within 2 hours. I nodded, fastening my vest button. 2 hours is plenty of time for a liar to trip. We entered the lobby. A young receptionist smiled and asked for our appointment. Frank flashed his bar card, voice even. "We're here to see Mr. Raymond Clark. He knows why." She hesitated half a second, then dialed. A few minutes later, the elevator slid open and Raymond Clark appeared. Silver hair, ash-gray suit, the same slick, honeyed voice I remembered. "Ethan Ward," he said, a smile that never reached his eyes. "It's been a long time. I hear you're still in Santa Barbara, designing those oceanfront homes, right?" "Right," I said. "And I hear you're still good at masking plate numbers on money." Frank coughed lightly, cutting in, "Shall we talk in your office?" Clark chuckled and turned to lead. "Naturally. Lawyers do prefer closed rooms." His office sat at the end of a glass corridor overlooking Houston's commercial sprawl. Everything was clean, bright, not a stray sheet in sight. He poured white wine, voice intimate. "You know, Ethan, we used to be great partners. If Elena hadn't been so stubborn, that project would have worked." I tightened my grip on the glass, the chill running over my hand. "Stubborn?" I said slowly. "She was trying to do the right thing. That's what you call stubborn?" He shrugged. "Fairness is flexible. Profit isn't." Frank cut in, producing a folder. "Mr. Clark, we're not here to debate ethics. We have evidence that Red Coast funnels funds to Ruiz Holdings via shell accounts in Monterey." He leaned back, smiling. "And perhaps you don't know that every one of those transactions is audit clean. No one can touch me." I set a trifold sheet on the desk, Camilla's letter. "How about this?" He glanced down, his eyes shifting. Only slightly, but enough. "An anonymous note?" he said, trying for bland. "I don't read random mail." "You should," I answered. "It's from the woman Alex Ruiz promised to marry after he got citizenship, the one carrying his child. The same woman you paid to keep quiet." The words cut, and the room's air changed. He gave a dry laugh and stood. "I don't know who she is." "Do you?" Frank opened his laptop and cast the screen to the wall. 4 transfers from Red Coast to an individual named Camila Ortega, totaling $80,000. "Quite a coincidence," Frank said. "A woman you don't know receiving regular payments from your company." He moved around the desk for the machine, but I blocked him with a palm. "You can't touch the light, Raymond," I said softly. "It will only reflect you." He looked at me, momentarily rattled, then turned cold. "You don't understand, Ethan," he said. "The Ruizes are pawns. I don't run them. I keep the flow moving. If you damn it, you'll hurt a lot of people, including the ones you think you're protecting. I heard the threat inside the warning. Is that a threat? He smiled. A reminder. Some people don't like seeing light. The door opened and Green walked in with 2 agents. Raymond Clark, she said, you are being detained pending investigation into cross-border money laundering. Please cooperate. He turned, looked back at me, the smile gone. You just signed your own closing papers, Ethan. I answered softly. I only finished the blueprint you left blank. As the cuffs snapped on, I saw calculation in his eyes, not fear, as if he still had a last card. Out in the corridor, Green spoke low to Frank. We found several hidden files. One mentions a newly opened fund in California. Beneficiary name, Olivia Ward. Frank looked at me, stunned. Ethan, did you hear that? I stopped. A dry, hot wind blew, smelling of gas and scorched plastic. I heard, I said slowly. And if I'm right, Clark laid a fallback by wiring a trap around my daughter. Green nodded. He pushed a large sum into the real Olivia Ward account at Santa Barbara Bank via Ruiz Holdings right before arrest. Frank frowned. Hold on. Olivia did not know of that. I checked the logs. The money sat there exactly 17 minutes, then auto-routed to a shell company in Houston. No user action, no login, no matching access history. Green nodded again. Exactly. Treasury flagged it as pass-through laundering via unwitting account. No co-conspirator element. But without a public statement, the press will smear her. My hands tightened. Not from fear, but from seeing how long this blow had been queued. I said quietly, Clark never meant to run. He wanted me to go back to Santa Barbara carrying the storm. Frank set a hand on my shoulder. We'll intercept it before it hits her. I looked toward Houston's horizon, where sun met industrial haze, glowing a dirty orange. No, I said. We won't intercept it. We'll steer it to the right target. As the car pulled away from the district, I caught my own reflection in the glass. Tired, but my eyes clearer than ever. All roads had joined. Ruiz, Clark, Camila, Olivia, parts of a single drawing. And if Elena were alive, she would say what I was thinking. Every structure has a failure point. Hit it, and the whole thing falls. I texted Green. Prepare account freeze warrants. I'm flying back to Santa Barbara tonight. Frank watched me. What will you do when you get there? I stared into the flare where the sky looked like fire. I'll throw the glass wall wide open, not to illuminate, but to reflect, so everyone sees who's truly standing in the dark. I returned to Santa Barbara under a sky heavy with clouds. The ocean wasn't blue, but a scratched mirror gray. The glass house stood quiet on the cliff, its panes reflecting the storm like a stage set for a final act. Frank waited on the porch, rain-soaked, holding a drive with all of Clark's data. Green confirmed, he rasped. Clark used Olivia Ward's name in the chain as the last wash. Money from Ruiz to her account, then straight to the Caymans. But the whole stream is frozen now. I looked out at the sea. Then we have a chance to do what Clark fears most. Frank understood and nodded. Expose it in public. That night, we set up a makeshift briefing table in the living room, the same room that caught the first showdown with Alex. The glass wall now held a big screen, linked straight to local media outlets Green had lined up. Far off, the storm rolled in, lightning tearing the sky. Olivia came down the stairs, eyes still red, gaze steady. I'm ready, she said. We follow the plan. I nodded. You speak the truth. The light will do the rest. At exactly 8 in the evening, the live broadcast began. I stood before the glass wall, ocean wind pushing the drapes and my vest. My name is Ethan Ward, I began. 3 weeks ago, the Ruiz family and their partner, Red Coast, Imports, used the Catalina housing project as a cover to launder money. When discovered, they pivoted and tried to frame my daughter by pushing illicit funds into an account in her name. Tonight, I'll play every piece of proof. So not just Santa Barbara, but the whole country sees who stands behind this. I nodded to Frank. He rolled the footage. On the screen, Sergio and Lucy appeared at the contract signing, their voices mixing Spanish with on-screen translation. 3 months, paperwork, split the money. Then came the transfer images from Red Coast to Ruiz Holdings, then from Ruiz into the account of Olivia Ward, bearing Raymond Clark's digital signature. Frank overlaid the technical proof, access logs showing the deposit into Olivia's account from a Houston IP, while Olivia in Santa Barbara had no login or activity at that time. Clear evidence the account was exploited, not used by her. The room thickened, the only sound the rain drumming the glass roof. Then came the final part, the clip from the Houston conversation. My voice echoed through the speakers. "You can't touch the light, Raymond." His voice replied, "Some people don't like seeing light." I turned toward the camera and said, "True, but the light doesn't need their approval. It only needs them to be unable to hide." Before the final scene played, Green stepped to the mic and spoke clearly for the broadcast. "Please note, all related accounts have been frozen, and preliminary findings confirm that Olivia Ward is a victim. Her name and account were exploited. Legally, there is no basis for charges against her. We will safeguard her rights and transfer all evidence to federal authorities." Outside, thunder cracked. A flash of lightning lit the glass wall behind me, bouncing off Clark's handcuffed face in the video. Olivia gripped my hand, trembling, yet her eyes shone as Green appeared on screen, announcing the formal federal indictment against the entire Red Coast group. Frank whispered, "Every news channel is replaying it." I looked at my daughter. "See? The storm came, but this time we're standing in the light." When the broadcast ended, rain still lashed like judgment, but no one inside felt fear. Frank packed the equipment, placing the last hard drive on the table. "I'll deliver this to Green in the morning. From here, the rest belongs to justice." I nodded, "And ours is to keep living." Olivia stepped onto the porch. Rain hit her hair and shoulders, yet she stood still, looking up at the sky. "Dad," she said, her voice trembling but lighter, "turns out light isn't only to expose the truth. It can warm too." I looked at her, and for the first time in years I saw Elena's smile in her. "Yes," I said, "and we kept it alive." That night, after Frank left, I sat alone in the study. The storm had softened, leaving only the steady pulse of waves. I opened Elena's final blueprint, the finished glass house bearing her note in the margin. "Nothing remains forever in darkness, because even darkness needs light to exist." I added a line beneath it, and when light reflects, it not only reveals guilt, it restores dignity to those forgotten. I closed the book and looked toward the sea. The water mirrored the moon breaking through clouds, so bright that everything, the house, the ocean, even me, became part of that light. In that moment, I understood. True revenge isn't about destroying someone. It's forcing them to see themselves, bare, unguarded, in the mirror of justice. The storm was gone. The glass house still stood, and Elena, wherever she was, must have been smiling, because I had finally completed her design in the only way she would have accepted, with truth. People say revenge makes you bitter, but I learned something else. When you build justice with truth, it stops being revenge. I lost a wife, nearly lost a daughter, yet I reclaimed what mattered most, the belief that light will always be stronger than darkness. And if this story makes you believe that justice can be designed with intellect, courage, and love, then hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and tell me where you're listening from, because I still have many blueprints left, ones that don't build houses but uncover truths people try to bury. Thank you for walking with me through this journey. Don't look away, because wherever darkness exists, an architect is already preparing to switch on the light.